And with that, we'll turn it over to Steve.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. It's I always enjoy doing these, and this is I guess this would be a participant request tasting today. We are going to visit the Finger Lakes in upstate New York. So about the region, this I tried to find a map, and unfortunately I couldn't find one that I liked, but essentially we have I think there are 11 or 12 in total lakes. They were formed by glaciers moving south, and so these lakes are very deep. They carved out of, in many cases, granite base. They are so deep, in fact, that Cornell, which is located in Ithaca, Cornell University, actually cools the university with just pulling water off the bottom of this lake. So very cool climate lakes, very deep, which gave rise to viticulture here. Now, this has been a growing region for a long time. It began, the first grapes for the production of wine were planted around 1830, roughly 1830. But the grapes that they were planting were part of a family called Vitis Lambrusca, which the most popular, I would say, Vitis Lambrusca wine is Concord grape juice. So the varietals that they were growing here were capable of making wine, not capable of making really good quality wine. So, but in the absence of European varietals at the time, the Vitis Lambrusca varietals continued, and this became a region for the production of fairly average communion wine and kind of very fruit forward, very sweet drinking still wines. Things progressed, but then as the rest of the world or the rest of the United States suffered as well, in 1920 with Prohibition, the industry really came to a screeching halt. So all the growth, vineyards were kind of, I mean, there were some wineries that were allowed to continue selling, I mean, to produce for communion, but for the most part, the industry collapsed. And it really wasn't until the middle 1950s, rather, when a Ukrainian named Dr. Konstantin Frank came to Cornell University to specifically to work at the it's called the New York Agricultural Experimental Station in Geneva. And the ag station, a lot of people kind of forget Cornell technically is an ag school, and had, since I want to say the late 1800s, had worked with the state of New York at the ag station, or the research station in Geneva, to promote not just viticulture, but agriculture throughout New York State. Well, Dr. Frank came to Cornell and again was working at the ag station. He said, you know, in my native country, we grow really nice. I mean, we grow vinifera varietals, I mean, European varietals. You have to kind of select the certain right varietals because it is cold, but you can produce pretty nice wine. And so we got kind of this part of New York thinking about that. And in the early 1960s, Dr. Frank actually started his own winery. He's actually referred to now as Dr. Vinifera because, for the most part, vinifera vines and vinifera vines are vines like Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Pinot Noir, Cabernet, pretty much every wine you might encounter in the old world and in California and in Washington State. Nearly all those wines are vinifera varietals, European grape varietals. So Dr. Konstantin Frank was kind of the original promoter of vinifera varietals on the East Coast. Now, unfortunately, after Prohibition, while they were planting vinifera, when Prohibition was repealed, people went back to drinking wine from California, from Europe, and New York kind of got lost again. But again, Frank came, started planting vinifera, and really by the end of the 20th century, the Finger Lakes were really taking off. There was a lot of growth, particularly about 4 lakes. Let's see, Keuka, Seneca, Cayuga, and there's one other lake that Canandaigua. Those 4 lakes primarily are where today most of the viticultural, wineries are centered. So what makes this such a cool region is that the climate is very well suited for certain grapes, not all, but for certain grapes, it's really dialed in. Riesling, very cool climate grape. This grape has attracted winemakers from France's Alsace region, from Germany, from Austria, to the Finger Lakes to work specifically with those cool climate grapes. Chardonnay also, Gruner Veltliner, Gewürztraminer, in the red varietals, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, there are a couple Gamay, there are a couple other lesser known reds, but they do need to be tolerant of colder weather. And this part of New York gets pretty warm in the summer, but again, those lakes are cool, and they provide a lot of temperature moderation for the surrounding wineries. So I've always I've very much I've always loved Riesling, and this is one area in the United States that really does make exceptional Riesling. In fact, it was in the early 2000s that one of Dr. Frank's wines actually won Best of Show at a World Riesling competition in Strasbourg. So it wasn't even, maybe similar to the 76 Paris tasting where California bested the French on their territory. We were doing the same thing with Riesling in a very well-known Riesling wine growing region. So the quality of the wine produced up here in certain varietals is really exceptional. It's attracted a lot of great talent, and it was all started by Dr. Frank from Ukraine. So let's start by tasting the first wine. Pour yourself a glass, give it a little swirl, give it a nose.
And feel free to put your thoughts in the chat or unmute
Absolutely.
yourself and share it.
So what makes particularly Riesling so such a success in this region is it mimics some of the best examples. And on the nose, you notice it almost smells like wet gravel. There's a minerality to it. This soil is fairly complex. It's mostly the alluvial silt or the silt left over after the glaciers retreated. Underneath that, it's rocky and gravelly, and so there's a lot of minerality in the soil that these grapes can tap into, and it kind of reflects that. There's a whiff of we would describe it as petrol. It's a smell. It doesn't really smell like gasoline, but it has gas notes. Don't worry, that is not there. There is no petrol in your wine. It's actually it's kind of sad to pull the curtain back on this one, because for the longest time I did not know, but science has shown that this was always a marker for old world Riesling, and that the gassy note, particularly parts of Germany. And unfortunately, what was discovered is it was primarily the yeast strain that they were using in Germany had these as byproducts of fermentation. So there was that little sniff of petrol as a result of not so much anything but the yeast strain. So producers elsewhere are now using that yeast strain, and so we get a little bit of the petrol. But this Riesling has a gorgeous apple, peach, nectarine, some white flowers, maybe like honeysuckle, just a real pretty nose. So this is a bone dry Riesling, no residual sugar. In fact, my mouth is still watering. So you kind of have that sensation of biting into, let's say, a slightly underripe peach. You get the fruit flavors, but the sweetness gives way to acid. And this style of wine, I mean, Riesling as a varietal can be made from this level sweetness. It can be made sparkling, and it can go all the way through several gradations of sweetness, all the way up to a dessert wine, which I mean, very unctuous, pours out almost like syrup, very concentrated, still has acid in it, but a much sweeter wine. But so Riesling has that ability to span a lot of styles. But this is real bright and crisp, delicious with food because of that acidity. Great with things out of the water. I like it a lot with sushi, spicy Thai noodles. Although the spicier the cuisine, the more residual sugar you want in the wine. You actually want a little sweetness. It tempers the heat. But yeah, I very much like this wine, and I'm truly happy that Cornell was able to attract him, because he's definitely made a significant contribution to wine growing in New York State.
Yeah,
Any
Jack.
thoughts on this?
Yeah, Jack submitted his comments. A really nice all caps dry Riesling.
Yeah.
Not too fruit forward, green apple, pear a bit, really nice and refreshing with good food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I always think a Riesling is really sweet, and I get to drink this when I get home because I got waylaid and I'm in my office. So Scott has already opened the bottle, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, no, this Riesling, it really, as I said, it has the ability to produce a wide array of styles. I would say probably the biggest problem with Riesling is that oftentimes it's not grown in the right place. There are, I mean, if the climate, if you don't get a day that where the day might be warm, but the temperature drops significantly at night, you need that temperature drop to retain the acidity. Otherwise, the grapes continue to ripen overnight and ripen more the next day. And before you know it, most of the acid, or a lot of the acid, has been converted into sugar, which then either has to be fermented out or left in. And people generally don't like 16% Riesling, 16% ABV Riesling. So it often gets left in. But if the climate is suited for the grape, and it's able to slow the ripening down, kind of drag it out a little bit more, retain that acidity, yeah, you can get some really, really nice dry whites. And this is, like I said, I think this is an excellent example of the quality of wine they're producing up there. And yeah, really, really nice.
So I'm sure that region, like every place else, is getting warmer. And is that affecting things yet, or how's that?
It hasn't yet. And I mean, fortunately, because of the proximity to these cold bodies of water, they are able. I mean, I've been in Ithaca in the summertime, and it can get mid 90s during the day easily. And but you get closer to the water, and you can honestly feel that cool air blowing off. So thus far, they are still not suffering any serious ill effects. Probably they will have to adjust over time. What possibly could happen is, as they plant, the next time these vines need to be replanted, because vineyards do get replanted periodically, depending on the vineyard. Although actually, while I'm thinking of that, this bottle of Riesling actually has some of Dr. Frank's original circa 1960 something Riesling. So that has not been replanted, but it's possible that as vineyards need to be replanted over time, they will be planted with grapes that are more drought tolerant, maybe, or certainly more heat tolerant. But thus far, this region seems to be doing well.
Yeah. So I know a lot of vines last a long, long time, but I mean, is there like an average lifespan of this kind of vine? Just curious.
It depends on the vine.
Mhm.
It depends on the health of the vine, and how well it's suited to that environment. For example, there are vineyards in California planted to Zinfandel, which is very well suited to these areas of Northern California. Those vines are 150, in some cases older. There in Chile, there are vines that are over 200 years old.
Wow.
Not all varietals benefit from that. For example, Cabernet Sauvignon usually has about 20, 25 years before they will replant the Cabernet. Just the quality drops. But Riesling, I mean, it has to be generally if you're a winemaker that has access to old vine, you really typically will need to augment it with younger fruit, because the tonnage, the amount of fruit that those old vines produce drops significantly as the vine ages. So the older the vine is, the less fruit it produces. But the quality, because those vines are, they may be 30 plus feet in the ground, and if the soil is complex, that vine is sucking up all of that complexity, and only a handful of clusters are getting the benefit. So quality wise, you get great quality. You just unfortunately, the tonnage is lower, so you generally will have to augment with younger fruit.
Okay.
But no, it depends on the grapevine. Certain vines can age for centuries, literally. Other vines have a higher cycle, have a shorter lifespan, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Lisa has a question. I find that the nose of this Riesling is very mild and perhaps dissipates as it meets air. Is that a function of eating while smelling?
No, I would say, I mean, it may be that just the sensitivity that, your nose is acclimating to the smell. I mean, that typically happens while wine tasting, where, the commercial nose blind, the more you smell the same smell, the less sensitive you are to it. If you ever get that way, by the way, you notice less of the smell. The technique that is often used is we'll just kind of smell our shoulder, smells back of the wrist, anything that smells different, and that causes the brain to kind of reset. But typically Riesling, I mean, Riesling is considered one of the aromatic grapes, so it generally has a fairly fruit forward. I mean, its descriptors are all fruit. Yeah, I mean, outside of rocks and petrol, and some flowers, most of the specifics, I mean, the descriptors of Riesling are going to be fruit driven. But I mean, some of them have more subtle flavors. I mean, so more subtle aromas. The other issue is, the colder it is, I don't know how warm the wine is, the colder it is, the more closed it will be. This one I like pretty cold, but I also like to watch it kind of open up as it gets exposed to air and as it warms. So maybe see what it does as it warms up a little bit.
I'm still trying to kind of get over the petrol descriptor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's well, and the thing about it is, I mean, like, and this falls into the category of an old world wine. Old world wines rarely are savored by themselves. They usually go with food. There is always food or typically there is a food pairing with the wine. And so what the wine does by itself is a little different than what it does with food. I mean, if you think about where this wine, I mean, like Wiener Schnitzel is amazing with this. Sausages, amazing with this. It, like I said, it has an affinity for spicy Asian cuisine. Anything out of the water, any fish out of the water, salt or fresh water. It does. There's very nice things. It kind of draws out the minerality of the fish. Yeah, so it typically, I mean, Riesling is very much a food wine. It can be enjoyed by itself, certainly, but with even things like, a little bit of Gruyere cheese or some bread and olive oil. I mean, it will change as it's paired with food.
So Jack Altman, I still have to ask you, did you whip up any special appetizer to go with this? You need to unmute.
I did. I've done two things, and I tried both with this wine. I'll try both with the next. I did it. I mentioned this to someone else. I did it with a brie with some fig jam and some crushed dill potato chips, and it was really nice with that. The sweetness of the jam really worked well because it's not a terribly sweet wine, and it was really nice. And then I also made a dry rubbed chicken with feta and walnut, and the spiciness of that was excellent with that. So it
Sounds great.
It's an all-round good food wine, but I cheated. I tried some yesterday so I could figure out what I wanted to make with it. but it was nice just having a glass on the porch. I mean, it's also just I really like this wine.
Yeah.
And I was, I'm like Finger Lakes Taylor wine kind of mentality. So I had to really change my, thinking and get into that.
Well, so that's actually, so Taylor was one of the original wineries that started pre-Prohibition and did continue after, but Taylor was they are still primarily making wine out of non-vinifera varietals.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is the irony. This region.
We referred to them as Jewish Seder wines.
Right, exactly.
I don't mean to slander anybody.
No.
You would drink that for Seder as a wine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. I mean, this is Taylor and Manischewitz. I mean, that's the style. That's really the style of this wine. Until Dr. Frank. Well, should we move on to the second?
Let's do that. Great, thank you.
So this wine comes from Ravines, a younger winery, much younger. I want to say early 2000s is when they got going. They are in Geneva, near the Geneva Research Station, and I actually tried to get their Cabernet Franc because their Cab Franc is one of the things they're known for, and one of the reds that Finger Lakes is most known for. Unfortunately, there is no Finger Lakes Cab Franc at the moment in Kansas. So Pinot Noir is the next best, and there are actually some varietals that we don't see that. I mean, some of them are hybrids, but a lot of them have histories in Austria, Germany, Switzerland, places like that really we don't find outside of regions like this. But fortunately, Ravines had their 2019 Pinot Noir. So again, a cool climate grape like Riesling. Pinot doesn't do well when it's very warm. It has a really thin skin that is susceptible to mold and mildew and hailstones and all sorts of other things. So it really needs the right climate to do well. And the complexity of the soil is there. The orientation is there. The proximity to water is there. So there really is a lot boding well for good quality Pinot from this region. I would say it probably won't get to the level of, say, Willamette in Oregon. I think they're probably still have a leg up on that one, but the quality of Pinot here is quite good. So on this guy, nice cherry notes, definitely a red fruit driven. So think like tart things, cranberry, rhubarb, strawberry, raspberry, tart cherry. It has kind of that bright acidity. I'm not getting a lot of the dark fruits like dark plum or dark cherry. But some nice forest soil. Pinot has this ability to kind of capture, it's like that smell of fresh garden soil. And I get a little bit of that. Yeah, good acidity, nice length. Probably, I mean, again, a food wine because of that acidity. And when I say food wine, I mean, obviously you can have it by itself. There are certain wines that just have, I guess, maybe more of a favorable potential with food than others. And usually it's derived from acidity because that acid, it can cut fat. It causes the mouth to water. It becomes more, you sense more flavors. And acid just kind of adds a little pop of life to what we're eating. But yeah, this is very nice. Lighter style, but very much reflective of this region.
Let's see. Actually, Lisa has a question in regard to the Cabernet Franc. How does it compare to the Octopodo Cabernet? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Cabernet Franc on the North Coast. And Lisa, did I get that right? Octopodo?
Like Octopodo, yeah.
Okay.
A particular, yeah, a producer that we've had before. I would say I actually very much like East Coast Cab Franc. I might even like it more so than, well, there are not a lot of producers in California that do exclusively Cabernet Franc. There are a handful of them. In fact, one of them is one of the original founders of Boulevard. But the East Coast is more because they can't really produce the type of quality with, say, Cabernet. They do a little Merlot, but Cabernet needs a little bit different of a climate. So East Coast Cabernet, I mean, Cabernet Franc from Virginia, outstanding. It varietally correct. Cab Franc, red fruits, a little bit of tobacco leaf, black tea. It has some predictable qualities, and I find that Finger Lakes Cab Franc and Cab Franc from Virginia have this. They have everything it needs. Not to say that California doesn't grow good Cab Franc, but I would say by itself, I think I like East Coast better, maybe. But still, I mean, that's the great thing. I mean, it has all the varietal characteristics. It's got tannic structure. It could be, I mean, typically Cabernet Franc on the West Coast more often ends up in blends with Cabernet and Merlot in Bordeaux style blends. That's generally more often where it's used. There's certainly wineries that will do single varietal Cab Franc, but typically it's grown for producing red blends. But in the East Coast, they're less. They have a smaller palette, I guess, to work from. And so they typically do more monovarietal, but no, I very much like East Coast Cab Franc.
So how long before we get some of that in Kansas? Didn't you say it was not available anywhere in Kansas right now?
Yeah,
Cabernet Franc.
Well, only because not for any other reason that the Finger Lakes is not a huge region. In fact, I think I even noted down Currently, there are 7 wineries in Canandaigua, 25 wineries in Cayuga Lake, 19 wineries in Cayuga Lake, and 61 wineries in Seneca Lake. So, they're still, even though that's a sizable number of wineries, much of the wine that they're producing, the vast majority of it either gets consumed in New York State or in the region, but there's not a ton to mass distribute. So we kind of get what we get, and we just take it. But no, normally we would get Cab Franc. Nobody has one at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, this just in from Jack Altman. These are his comments on the Pinot Noir. It's very dry, more tannins than I expected in a Pinot. Plum and some notes of floral later. Not a great drinking wine to my taste, but excellent with food.
Yeah. No, I think very valid taste and notes.
Yeah. So what sort of food pairings would you have with the Pinot?
So Pinot has some, again, because of the acid, has some nice diversity. It still loves, I mean, one of my favorite meals with Pinot is actually Thanksgiving, because it is so diverse. It can deal with a lot of things, but this kind of wine loves, turkey, roast chicken, pork dishes, salmon. It's spectacular with salmon, trout, less fishy, fresh and saltwater fish, but really it likes lighter proteins primarily. Every once in a while you'll find a Pinot that might stand up to something with some wood smoke or something, but typically roasted, grilled are more common preparations. But yeah, I mean, like I said, turkey is phenomenal with Pinot Noir.
And then we keep flipping back to the Cabernet Franc. John said that his favorite is Ironstone, but it's really hard to get in Kansas. So I don't know.
Ironstone does do a Cab Franc. They're located in Lodi, right near Sacramento. And wow, I can't even think that I can think of their name. Scupney is the owner. But there is a winery in California that specializes in Cab Franc. Argentina actually is doing a lot of Cab Franc these days. Typically, when we see North American wineries doing it, it is a minor varietal for them. It has, unfortunately, as great a wine as it doesn't have the same marketability that, say, straight Cabernet has. So wineries will often, allocate their wines based on where they can sell them best. And unfortunately, selling Cab Franc in Kansas is not on everybody's top tier radar. But
yeah, can't imagine why.
We definitely do have good access to some, just not year round, I guess.
Right. Well, and Lisa commented that she got hers in Texas.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anybody have any comments on this one in terms of, other than Jack? Let's see. How are the Hamiltons and Carters doing? Are you enjoying this?
I would say also just kind of a pitch for the region. It's not the easiest place to get to, unfortunately. I mean, I think in the past I've flown into maybe Philadelphia and then taken a flight directly to Ithaca. But you can get in through Rochester. But it's really, I mean, it's a beautiful place. It has lots of bed and breakfast places. Actually, Ithaca, home to Cornell. So Cornell has a very famous restaurant management school, and so on the campus in Ithaca, there's their training hotel called the Statler. which you can always get a great meal because the people working in the Statler are students being graded, and so there's the added pressure of knowing they're being judged for their performance. But the town, they have great farmers markets. There are a lot of cideries. They do hard ciders, a lot of artisanal food products, cheese, places that are producing cheese, chocolates, things like that. So if you're a foodie and you kind of like the leisurely pace of upstate New York, it's a great place to visit. Again, a little hard to get to at times, but it really is a beautiful place, particularly in the summertime.
Yeah, the new thing, just FYI, is that Southwest flies to Syracuse now. That just started last summer.
Yeah,
Brand new.
Yeah.
Our kid is going to grad school up there, so we got to experience that. But Ithaca is amazing. It has just a million waterfalls and beautiful hiking, and it's just a kind of a breathtaking place, particularly in the summer. I mean, it's just lovely.
Well, and again, I kind of I judge a lot of my travel destinations by what I can eat there, and the food scene in Ithaca is really good. I mean, with the restaurant management school there, the restaurants just in their college downtown are outstanding. You can always get a great meal, and really diverse. I mean, I think the first time I ever had Ethiopian food was in Ithaca. I mean, you can get a lot of really good diverse food, and so highly recommend it.
Yeah, they are home to the famous Moosewood restaurant,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is vegetarian.
Absolutely. Yep.
And we went there for lunch, and I swear half the people in there were on a pilgrimage.
Oh, Moosewood.
I have your cookbook. I have to come to your restaurant.
No, Moosewood is a destination. It's kind of funny. There were times, and this was a long time ago, but there were times where I always thought that there was a little bit of a maybe some of the recipes at the old Paradise Cafe might have come from Moosewood.
Very similar.
It was a very similar vibe and style.
Yeah. A lot of old hippies.
Yes.
It's pretty fun.
Yep.
So here's another question regarding, because we got on the topic of the vines where you're replacing them. This is from Scott. How many years before they actually get productive for making wine? How long does it take for them to kick in?
So generally speaking, after about 3 to 4 years, they'll start kind of in the consistent fruit production. It's usually until about 5. They'll hold off until about 5 years before they start making wine, but it'll probably be wine that is blended with other wine because at 5 years the vines are very juvenile. The quality that they're producing is good, but it's not great, and so but they'll start utilizing the fruit at about 5 years. But it really, I would say probably 10 years, it really hits its stride. And then say for Cabernet Sauvignon around 20, the yields decline and the quality starts declining. And so they'll often, replant at that stage. But certain vines, I mean, they just age different. I mean, there are always exceptions. I mean, there is very old Cabernet that still exists. There is very old Pinot Noir, but generally those are where the vines have found a home that is irreplaceable. Most times they're not that lucky.
Well, so it's a commitment, boy, to start a vineyard.
It is. If unfortunately the adage is true, if you want to make $1 million in the wine industry, start out with like $20 million. Or 50 million. I mean, it's the startup costs are immense because I mean, even so those first 5 years, you're still, unless you own the land outright, you're still paying a bank. You're still probably paying a vineyard manager to make sure that the vines are healthy and growing properly. And you've just invested a ton of money in irrigation and trellising and all sorts of other things. and you're really not doing anything yet. You're just adding to the bill. It's definitely a labor of love in many, 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 many respects.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, certainly some of our trips to the local vineyards around here they've all talked about that. I know
Yeah.
Trivedi is still importing his grapes and making the wine because his grapes haven't gotten in yet.
Yeah.
And then the one that we went to out south, they made it very clear that it was very labor intensive, that,
Oh, yeah.
it was not your leisurely retirement project that they had hoped it would be.
Well,
So,
specifically for us, the other disadvantage that our wine makers have locally is that there isn't a labor force that's trained to do this type of agriculture. I mean, if you need custom cutters for wheat or corn, you can easily find those. But I have yet to see any grape harvesting machines anywhere around here. So you're having to harvest them manually, which is highly labor intensive. So yeah, I mean, the fact that our industry, I mean, the grape growers in this area don't have the resources that high concentrations, regions that have significantly more wineries and have the infrastructure there. That's a challenge. It takes longer to harvest. It takes longer to crush. You may have to borrow equipment. You may not own the equipment at all, so you may have to find ways around that. I mean, there are a lot of challenges that make it even more labor intensive than it even could be.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and Jack commented that Blue Jacket Winery, which we visited not too long ago, started producing after 7 years and then really got going after 10.
Right.
So
yeah. No, I mean, it's a really awful, I mean, it's a hard calculation, because you pretty much have to decide, well, do I continue losing money, or do I make a product that may not represent what I'm about? I mean, you can't really force great wine out of not so great grapes. You're really dependent on those grapes for when they are, when the grapes are good, you'll start making good wine. I don't have the intestinal fortitude to do that. I have great respect for farmers, and I know that I could not be one.
Yeah. I was wondering about how automated like operations like Ravines and those folks and the Finger Lakes really are. I mean, are they small enough to be more manual type places, or do they have, are they huge like commercial farms that with a lot of machinery? How does that work?
Well, the thing is, and you can, I guess you can kind of see, I'm trying to figure out, but you can kind of see behind me. If you are going to harvest by machine, your vines have to be trained and spaced accordingly. So, I mean, you basically the grape, the pruning machines and the harvesters, they actually go above the vines. They run along above them, and there are different ways of getting the fruit. But basically, the vines have to be planted with that in mind. And there are a lot of vineyards that either because they're very old or they never planned on it, simply could not accommodate mechanized harvesting. So I would imagine that honestly, because there are places like Taylor's and Manischewitz and large, even Welch's. I mean, the grape juice industry is New York and New Jersey. I would imagine that there is probably a lot of equipment that can be called on. I mean, contract wise, that they could get. So it really would depend on the size and scale. I mean, to harvest the vineyard behind it, behind me, I would imagine that is mechanically harvested, only because that's you would need a lot of labor, working a lot of hours to pick.
Right.
So my guess is it is mechanically harvested.
Okay. Yeah. And Lisa has a comment about like celebrity endorsed wines, I guess,
Mhm.
yeah, she presumes that it's just a matter of fiscal or like financial support as opposed to they're probably not out picking the wine or picking the grapes, but
Right.
yeah, I don't know how
Yeah.
involved.
No, it is usually, I mean, there are very few, um, trying to think of celebrities that I know that really do focus on their wine, and there definitely are some,
Mhm.
um, but in most cases they are purchasing property, and you know their celebrity allows them access to property, and they have the funds to acquire the property.
Mhm.
And that's really you can always hire a winemaker and a vineyard manager, but you got to start with some land. So yeah, I mean, more and more there are celebrity endorsed wines. I guess I typically will just judge them based on the wine. I don't really care so much about the backing of the wine. I don't want to. I guess I don't want to buy a piece of popular culture simply for buying popular culture. If it's good, that's great. I mean, like, actually, it's kind of funny. Sting and his wife own a great winery in Tuscany, and the wines are delicious. And there
Yeah.
are. I actually have heard that. Well, it's no longer. I think at least Angelina Jolie has sold off her share of it, but when she was married to Brad Pitt, they purchased a large estate in the south of France to produce a rosé called Miraval. And I had read that actually Brad is really, I mean, he spends a lot of time working with the winemaker on that, and so that is an example where
Yeah.
there is some interaction.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of Coppolas on here of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Now,
that's a popular one.
right. No, and Francis Ford Coppola, I mean, he did start out acquiring some really outstanding property. I mean, he purchased the original Inglenook winery, and it's, Inglenook, yes, it was jug wine back in the day, but they also were some of the early settlers too. I mean, the early wineries set up in Napa and Sonoma, and so he's acquired certain properties that are really, I mean, kind of historic,
Mhm.
uh, significant historic pieces in American viticulture, in the American wine industry. There is, I mean, it is, with all wine, it is a business, and I mean, all wines will have most wineries will have wines that really show what they're about, and then others that we refer to as the keep the lights on. They are products that it's not their finest work, but they keep the lights on.
Yeah. Yeah. We got a couple more tasting notes. Cliff has said he's back to the Riesling. I'm tasting
Mhm.
more orange notes as the
Mhm.
Riesling opens up more. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's as a varietal, it's really laden with a lot of potential aromatics. I mean, I love it actually as it does open up. I mean, now I'm getting kind of a little lime skin thing, and I smell the orange. It definitely changes, and it will change as it warms up, and also as it oxidizes as it interacts with air.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool stuff.
Yeah. So I suppose you shouldn't throw ice in it like I do with my white wine.
It's funny that's actually been a debate among wine people for a long time, and uh, there are arguments on both sides. The
Mhm.
arguments against are that you dilute it and you change the pH of the wine, so because the water has mineral content, you may be changing the effect. However, on the other side, there's the argument that yes, but if the wine is too warm, it already will have problems that you don't. I mean, you want it cooler, so having cooler wine is beneficial. Lots of people are. I mean, yeah, it's been a constant battle, but I guess I kind of lean on the side if you like it better that way, that's the only point of drinking wine. You're supposed to enjoy what you're drinking, and so you're the only person you need to satisfy on that one.
Yeah, that's always been my motto. It's like,
Absolutely.
and then Jack points out that an ice reduces the alcohol content, which is always a good plan.
Yeah.
So
No, I know. I mean, I've met numerous people who very well credentialed, kind of the Illuminati of the wine world who will throw ice in their wine. So
see, I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
like, hanging with the big dogs, I guess, on this. Well, does anybody else have any other comments? We've got a few minutes left, and maybe we can chit chat a little bit about the next one of these programs.
Yeah.
We've had to change the date because Steve is taking his kid to college on August 18th. So the next one will be Wednesday, August 24th. And we've updated the calendar on the website, and we'll send out that information to you in an email to remind you. But I know last time we kind of took kind of suggestions from the group, and Jack came up with, a domestic winery, and we came up with Finger Lakes, but I didn't know if there's a region that you all are interested in learning more about, maybe something we haven't heard about, I don't know. I know we've hit Spain. Have we hit Portugal yet?
I would love to do Portugal. I'm hoping that as we start seeing wine ship in the fall, that we'll get some more. I don't have a ton of Portuguese that I like at the moment, unfortunately.
Other ideas are Australia or sparkling wines. May be kind of nice. And New Zealand.
Yeah. All that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can let you surprise us, but I think those are some good. It's so hard to remember what we've had in the past, but it's been a while, I think, since we've done New Zealand and Australia, and then Scott threw in from Argentina and Chile. Those are always really good too.
Yeah. Traverse City is good.
Which one?
Traverse City.
Oh,
Michigan.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
They compete with Finger Lakes, I think, pretty equally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess actually you think about it, the climate's pretty similar.
Right.
Unfortunately, the production is much smaller. And it generally, I wish we could get Traverse City wines. I mean, I would say the vast majority will stop probably at Chicago. I mean, it's consumed domestic. I mean, it's consumed regionally, but it is mostly limited to the upper third of the Midwest.
So we just have to go there.
Yes,
that's right. I think road trip for retirement boot campers. The Carters and the Hamiltons are all over it. Absolutely.
It's a worthwhile trip. There's a peninsula that starts with an L. I can never remember the name, north of Traverse City. And they have some of the best wineries I've been to in the United States. They're wonderful.
Yeah. Cliff threw out rosés. We haven't done many of those. That might be fun.
Let me see I would love to do rosé. The only challenge with it is we've kind of, rosé is very seasonal, and typically rosé will arrive around March, and we're still in pretty good supply. But the options are dwindling. We could still do rosé. We could definitely do rosé. I've got some rosé.
We've now given you a million different suggestions, so you get to pick. How's that?
All right. Well, I will. I'll kind of shake the tree and see what falls out. With unfortunately, like everything right now, supply chain issues are hitting our industry pretty aggressively. In fact, I saw this morning there's a labor protest going on at the Port of Oakland, which a lot of our wines come through, and they've shut down the Port of Oakland temporarily. So we're only as good as the trucks who deliver to us,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So
Yeah.
I will see what's available and what looks interesting, and kind of work from the things that we've talked about.
Sounds perfect. All right. So we will see hopefully a bunch of you on August 24th. And again, look for the reminder in your email, but or you can go ahead and find it online and register. So
Perfect.
thank you for joining us. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And thank you, Steve, as always. It's really, really informative. And I'm going to go home and have some Riesling. I'm really
Yes.
excited.
Yes, you will love it.
All right. All right. Take care.
Thank you all.
Bye.